Hey guys, here I go again, this time with Medusa Gambit Madness. There is quite an interesting story. How did I come up with this opening? I was playing some Blitz and Bullet games. This time I was playing Bullet. And since I always used to play like King's Indian or um, Grunfeld defense, and uh, mandatory moves for that opening are knight f6 and g6. I played knight f6, but because of my mouse sensitivity, instead of g6, I just played g5. And what happened there? My mouse went instead of g6 on g5, and I was forced to play this game. Even more interesting fact that I won a beautiful game after bishop g5, and then I said, let me just check if I played it correctly. And it wasn't bad at all. Then I said, okay, fine, but I should never do this again. Within a month, it happened to me again, and then once again played g5. And I said, okay, I definitely have to check it out and to see what am I supposed to do. Then I just Googled it and found Medusa Gambit Madness. There is a guy, um, Clyde Nakamura from Hawaii. Um, and that guy used to play an interesting openings and some unorthodox or just non-standard opening stuff. This was one of the things that he covered in his blog, and I kind of like it so much, and I used some of that material. Plus, I added a couple of correspondence games, and I added two of my tricks. So let's get started. When you play g5, probably one of the most logical things is to take because it cannot be good, right? On the other hand, absolutely fine would be to play d5 or knight to c3. Um, I found out that somebody said, let's just try this, say a modern move like d5 and try to avoid this gambit. When you play bishop g7, bishop g5, of course that a logical thing could be knight c3, but in that case you just play reverse grab defense with just like there you have h3 g4 knight f3 bishop g2, you have h6 g5 knight f6 bishop g7. Although if they capture, which makes no sense because if you wanted to capture you could have done that immediately, bishop c1 c6 gives black queen b6 ideas with relatively good pressure against both pawn on f2 and pawn on b2. Apart from that, you also have knight c3 possibility. I tried in a couple of my bullet games crazy rook g8 to defend the pawn and just to push this pawn like g4, h5, h4, g3, and I had various results. Sometimes successes, sometimes not. But it's, I would say, a hyper modern approach of this already hyper modern type of the opening. And I believe that more logical would be h6. After e4, d6, what is this? This looks like a King's Indian with these two pawns being exposed on h6 and g5. After h3, which reminds me of King's Indian Magaramov defense with h3, where you remember they want to go knight f3, g4 to stop f5. Here we're not even threatening to push f5, but black goes for e5. The guy with a white piece is played knight f3, takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop g7. I'm pretty sure that he had way better ways of exploiting a possibly weak f5 square. I don't know how, and I don't know what am I supposed to say here, but probably at some point somehow to keep the knight on d4 and to transpose this knight from c3 to transfer it from c3 via e2 to g3. I don't know, just controlling, but maybe it's too slow. I don't know. So after bishop d3, knight c6, removing this knight and playing bishop d3 castles, queen d2, played rook e8, and played this pretty weird move, rook e6. After like f3, played knight h5, played rook b8, played c5, and played this beautiful knight f4 move. I just have to say that if you ask me like a zillions of times which position I would prefer and take rather here, that definitely would be black. So black had a great position and a very, very nice compensation for the given pawn. Apart from that, of course, they should be going with bishop g5. And here we just go with knight e4. I just want to go back to one position and to ask you, do you remember, guys, that after d4, knight f6, they can go with bishop g5? It's called Trompovsky system. It used to be very popular in the early 80s and 90s. And even nowadays, white players like to use this system. Even Carlsen used it in his first game of the match against Anand, and somebody said, or Karyakin, I believe, sorry, against Karyakin, and somebody said, it's not Trump, it's Trump, because on that day, the U.S. elections were won by, at that I believe it was like Donald Trump. So the thing is, after d4, knight f6, c4, g5, bishop takes g5, knight e4. And here, white has three options. They can go with bishop h4, they can go with bishop e3, and probably most logical and most, let's just say, active bishop f4. In case of bishop e3, I'm showing a game between Eric Schiller and FN against Clyde Nakamura. So once again, that guy was not relative of Hikaru Nakamura. He was a 2100 player from Hawaii with extremely interesting style of play, which the next game is going to show. So after queen d3, f5, f3, brought his knight back to d6, played short castle, played knight c6 in order to break with e5. Of course, you cannot play d5 because of e5, and c4 would be hanging. So after a3 to stop knight b4, he maybe stopped one evil, but another one was coming. So after e5, d5, for all of you who would like to practice some interesting attacking chess, e4, opening up this bishop and getting a square e5 for the knight. After d takes, knight e4, queen f6, he threatened both pawn on b2 and, more importantly, bishop on f2. In the game was d takes c6, but in case of knight f3, queen b2, queen a3, d takes, with the ideas of bishop c6, bishop f5, bishop c3, and rook h8, there is only one side who should be likable in this game. After d takes c6, queen f2, d takes c6, threatening bishop f5 or bishop h6. A beautiful end of this game was like this. What a nice mating net, and I really enjoyed this game a lot. Apart from bishop e3, white can go for bishop h4. And when they go bishop h4, I simply don't have a good feeling, just like in the main live on Trompovsky, that this bishop h4 could be anything that's special. c5, of course, with the ideas of queen b6 or queen a5. I just want to tell you one thing. You realize how in all these positions, maybe you haven't realized yet, but you will soon, we want to play and go with either queen b6 or queen a5. Does it remind you of something? Actually, if the ring does bell, then you know that we're actually talking about the vulture defense, which was the subject of the previous video and lecture. So one guy even said that this variation, I'm talking about the Medusa Gambit Madness, is an accelerated version of the vulture defense because black, for the sake of one pawn, is just faster. I show you something. For example, here I added my analysis. I'll show you what if queen c2, but what happens if white plays the most logical move e3? Believe it or not, he's lost. Queen a5, knight e2, you take on d4, you play bishop h6, and after knight f3, you play knight c6. You threaten knight e4, you threaten knight e2 followed by knight e4, you threaten rook g8 to prevent further, development by them. What an easy way of winning these games and getting like a very active game with lots of nice tactical tricks. I really enjoyed this one a lot. On the other hand, queen c2, then you just go with queen a5. That guy, Clyde Nakamura, played queen b6 against Chess Genius Computer back to 1994. And in case of queen e4, queen b2, of course, the rook is going to fall. So after like knight f3, f5, knight c3, played knight c6, and just like you see, he was enjoying very much activity of his pieces in these pretty original concepts. He now threatens some e3, d3, bishop g7, queen g6, and queen h6. And after bishop g5 went with the queen on g6 to defend his pawn and to threaten bishop, pushed the bishop on g7, pushed the e5, and after e5 played bishop f5 and destroyed the engine in already 17 moves. Engine was moveless. So just like you see, on queen c2, queen b6 looks tempting, but I definitely prefer queen a5. And after king d1, he also gave in his block something like f5 or stuff like that, but I have an improvement here. d5, followed by bishop f5 and some discoveries like knight f2 or knight g3, at the same time having the knight c6 and maybe long castle with fast attack against the terribly positioned king on d1. In case of queen a5, knight e2, you just exchange everything, take on d4, and we maybe have like a broken pawn structure, but this is the only problem that we're facing here. They have a broken castle. We have a possibly better center. So if I had to choose side, I definitely do that with and go with the black pieces. And finally, they can play bishop f4. And of course that there are like so many other examples with c5 followed by queen a5 or queen b6, but naturally it goes queen a5. Whether they go knight d2, you go queen a5, or e3, you just go with queen a5. But now you don't have tricky ideas after knight d2 with c takes d4 and bishop h6, like in the variation where the bishop was on h4. Although this is how this opening attracted my attention. So I played those bullet games. I blundered the pawn, and I just decided, because I like to play tactically, I just decided to go crazy and went for e5. I was very cheap at this point. My initial thought was, if he takes by bishop, I'll go with the bishop before and trap his queen. So the guy captured. I went for bishop before, and just around that time, if you remember, guys, I uploaded video about the Budapest Gambit. And there was one line where I said, let me just go with, in some of those positions with f6. And here I said, this looks similar to the Budapest Gambit. Let me just go with f6. And what I initially thought was, if he takes, and he cannot play bishop e3 because of bishop d2, queen f2, checkmate, for example, just to show you. I'm threatening bishop. If he moves the bishop, you can't take by bishop because of mate. And that actually means that you gotta take by queen where you lose the queen. Or they go g3, you once again take, they go like this and checkmate. Or they go bishop g3 and you take the queen. So lots of interesting opportunities. I initially thought he would go with this, and I would play d5, where I attack the center, threaten bishop h3. Consequently, I want to take the bishop on f4 and a knight on d2, and my position looks great. My opponent went for the most logical thing, knight g on f3. By the way, my opponent was an IM, and I decided to take. This was the only moment of the game where he made mistake. He was supposed to put his bishop on e3. Makes not much, like logic and sense to put the bishop back and to kind of block his development. But he had to play like that. He played bishop e5, I played castle. He played queen b3, because in the worst case scenario, I'm threatening bishop d2, knight f2 to do the fork. I played knight c6, developing my piece and defending the bishop, but at the same time harassing this bishop on e5. The guy played bishop g3, and guess what I did? I took on f3, and my opponent resigned because there was a lethal combination of the knight on e4 and the bishop on b4. Hope you enjoy this Medusa Gambit madness, and just like I told you in the beginning, I'll repeat again. This is for bullet and blitz, not for rapid and tournament games, and this is when you want to practice your tactical stuff, way of attacking, and when you just want to have time, or you want to badly humiliate some of your friends by playing these kinds of openings. Or one more option, if you mouse slip just like me, and then you just make some tactical masterpiece. Have a good one, guys, and see you next time.